Hello, I'm the Girly Organist, and today I'm here with composer Anthony White, and we're going to be talking about composition, which is very exciting because this is personally my first full chits and chats about composition. It's like this is going to be fun. So, Anthony, who are you?
Hi, hi everyone. Rebekah, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on here. Hi everyone, I'm Anthony. I am a composer and I am based in Scotland. So I work in St Andrews, and I work as a teacher and work as a freelance composer for film, TV, for large, small orchestras, small ensembles, yeah, I'm based in St Andrews, and I currently kind of work from my work desk here, but I use different studios across St Andrews, Edinburgh. Sometimes I go down to London, but St Andrews is my base.
And we were just talking before we started this interview about I live in sort of Lancashire, but quite close to the border. So it's only about an hour to Scotland from where I live. And we were talking about how great it is, but how it's also kind of known as the Tuscany of England. You know, we have the Yorkshire Dales and the Highlands and the Lake District up here. So we're going to talk a little bit now about how we got into composition. So that journey from, maybe what we wanted to do when we were younger, but then becoming sort of composers, and how we've got to where we are now. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting because we had a quick chat beforehand, and I actually did want to be a musician and composer. Well, I had piano. I learned piano from an early age, but I was always fascinated by engineering and learning to fly and wanting to do that kind of thing. So engineering was kind of my go-to kind of thing, and it was. So I studied in Oxford. So I went to a boarding school. I went to Christ Church in Oxford, where I was very much, immersed in the core tradition, singing Anglican music at Worcester College in Oxford, and also Christ Church College as well. So my musicianship was there since an early age. Luckily, I was privileged to have that, and so. I had piano right through from the age of 5. I obviously sang in choirs, and it was then I learned to play violin, and subsequently the organ at the age of around 10, 11. And I remember my first experience when I played on the organ at Christ Church, which is a Riga organ, one of the school assemblies. And everyone was like, where's Anthony gone? He's gone up to the organ loft. There's this kind of thing up there. And everyone was like, waiting. Everyone was waiting. And then I started playing, and I was like, this is so cool. So I, that's kind of where my love of organ came, and organ playing came from. But it was going back to kind of composition. It was really, I'll say when I was 15, 16, 13, 14, 15, I would say, when I started to, really kind of immerse myself into composition, and something that I was interested in. I love to watch films, I love to analyze films, and I even have a whole book on Doug Adams's analysis to Lord of the Rings, the whole of the book with all the themes and everything, which I thought was incredible, and that inspired me. But there was actually a few people that helped me and inspired me along the way. So when I was at school in St Andrews, in St Leonard's, which is incidentally where the place where I'm teaching just now, my first person who I have to thank is Glyn Jenkins, who sadly is not with us anymore. He passed away last year, but he really started me going with harmony, understanding harmony, functional harmony, figure bass, which if not for him, I would have struggled through first and second year of uni. And I actually incidentally helped so many people with figure bass, and they, I know what a 5/3 chords, what a 6/3 is, but that's all thanks to him. So he helped me a lot. And then the second person I'd like to thank who helped me on my composition journey was Paul Shields. So I work with Paul now as one of my colleagues at St Leonard's, but he really pushed me forward in my composition and actually stretched me, because I very like being in my comfort zone. when I compose, and he made me compose in a serialist style, and everything in Schoenberg in 12-tone composition. So it was those two people that really started me off. And then when I was at university, I studied composition as kind of my sole kind of study, and I worked with Professor Paul Mealer, raw composer, on different projects, and he also very much inspired me to be the best I am, but also to stretch myself, and to just to kind of be the best composer, develop in style, technique, to go outside one's comfort zone. But it's all thanks to those three people that really pushed me forward, and my love of composition subsequently.
This is really interesting because I think we both play the same three instruments. So I started on violin with Suzuki violin, which obviously was...
Me too.
Yeah. Sausage and bacon.
Yeah.
And then moved to piano, and then organ. So it's interesting that we do play the same instruments, because I think a lot of the experience we've probably had musically, like orchestras and ensembles and things, is probably quite similar. And we've both been to boarding school, which I didn't realise before.
Do you ever? It was a lovely time, Rebekah, and I love boarding, and what's really odd now, I'm actually working a boarding house. So I've boarded, I've gone through the system, and I've come back full circle. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was a performer, and I mean, I am still a performer, but I did piano, and I went to Cheatham's, and I was piano. Then I went to RNCM in Manchester, Royal Northern College of Music, and it was, first study classical piano, and I hadn't played an organ at that point. It was only when I started to work while I was there that I actually, came across the organ. And then after a few years, I thought, okay, it's great, being able to play the piano, but let's face it, I need to be able to get a job. And so I started looking actually into PGCEs, because I was like, maybe. But they were only at the time offering one that was with instrumental tuition, not classroom. And I was like, well, you don't need a PGCE to be a peripatetic music teacher. So it felt like a bit of a misuse of time. So I thought, I'm going to go do something else instead. So I went and finished off my degree in music production. And so it was night and day, because I'd gone from, being like one of many pianists to, oh my goodness, we've got someone that we can record.
Yeah. It's actually a really fascinating topic, Rebekah, because it's something that have had to kind of be challenged with. And one thing I have realized, especially over the pandemic and over the lockdowns, is I just feel that now more than ever, it's so important to be multi-skilled, multifaceted, and have different irons in the fire. So as you said, you've got your music production, which is great, because you've got a person who can produce your music, basically, and record it. You're a pianist, you're an organist, you're a violinist, and it's you've got so many skills there as well, and also you're teaching as well. So it's you've got all these skills, and I think it's so important, especially in an ever-changing world, to have that skill set. Even if it's video editing, it's I think it's so important, and it kind of sparked that kind of thought as you kind of said that, because having these skills will really help you in the future.
Well, no, it's so true. I mean, the amount of times that I I suppose it's through music production, not through music performance, that I got into composition, because I had all of these hang-ups of I play the piano, that's what I do, and I'd applied to go into the RAF, radar, and work in radar, and they said, go away and get your degree and come back, because then you can go as an officer. So I thought, okay, I'll go and do my degree. So I thought, I'll go, continue with my piano and things. And so I did. So the idea of me, Rebekah that plays piano, composing anything, I mean, like, it was just not something that did. There was people that were first study composition. That was something they did. I had no idea when I was in music college really about software. I mean, you use it for A level, but it wasn't, it was very functional. It wasn't creative particularly. It was just fulfilling. And so it took me quite a long time, a good few years actually, to be comfortable to say, yes, I compose things. Yes, I write music. Because I was like, actually, I didn't know how to approach it. I didn't have any composition teachers per se. And so it was really through sonic art and sound art and sampling that I got into composition, which when I think of where I am now, it's a completely like crazy journey. And I wouldn't say it's not come full circle yet. Or maybe playing recitals, maybe. And then I've gone back into performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Rather than a pianist.
Yeah.
So it's been a strange, it's not necessarily straight to composition. For me, one of the biggest things was giving in to say, oh right, yes, I am a composer, and that's okay. It doesn't diminish my performance ability.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly the same with me. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago when I think it's 4 or 5 years ago when I created my first kind of Facebook composer account, and to label myself as a composer, I was thought, what qualifications, what experience do I have to call myself a composer? What have I done? Like, what constitutes a composer? Is it writing stuff on a page? Is it, working, with film? Is it, I just didn't know. And I thought it was daunting. I was like, I'm labeling myself as a composer. Do I feel okay about this? It's like, what kind of spec do I need to use? Or is there a spec? And so when I first put that down, I was like, okay, right, I'm a composer now. So first and foremost, it is daunting because, how do you label yourself? Because I'm an organist, I'm a pianist, I'm a teacher, but I'm obviously mainly a composer. So it's I think it's hard, especially for emerging composers, emerging musicians who'd like to get in the industry and compose more, to put that kind of title. I think it gives it kind of also a bit of what's the word? There's kind of, I mean, it brings kind of baggage with it because you're expected to do these things and that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's just hearing that. I mean, we're still relatively young in our careers as composers, and I think that that's important that people know. But we've both been on. We're not new to music, and we're not necessarily in the music industry either. And I think actually, having come from performance, I'm far more empathetic toward my attitude towards working with other musicians is far more empathetic than it would have been, I think. And that goes both ways. So, when someone's kind of a performer and I've given them some music, I'm far more malleable to their will in some ways, and vice versa. Because I kind of think I've been on both sides at different, and the worst thing you can do in some ways is only be on one side, because it's a strange interaction. There's all sorts of things where the pianist is like, I want piano there, and the sound technicians go, well, you can't because of this, and they just think that they're being awkward when actually, it might be a really legitimate reason. And so I just think like that awareness, like you said, is really useful. So let's talk. This is the really exciting part. Let's talk about our creative process. So on your Instagram, and I think this is kind of how I came across some of your things as well, you post quite a lot about your creative process. And process for me, I know, is one of like the most interesting things. And I mean, some people call it behind the scenes, but I feel like what most of us do, it's not just behind the scenes, it's like real time this is what my work day is. And I think that's a very different space to just a few clips of, oh, look at all the pretty, you know, aesthetic cool things. It's very, I mean, I posted a video this week, a practice session, and I was like, I'd love to see what somebody else, another organist, how they practice this piece, because no, it's not like when you're a string player, you know, you practice in an ensemble and you can pick up things from other people. So I suppose to create that same sort of ensemble space, but as a soloist through social media. So what's your creative process? Let's say you get a commission for a work. What do you do? What happens?
A very, very good question, Rebekah. Truly, it depends on the nature of the project or the commission. So when it comes to film and TV, say it's a commission to compose a soundtrack for a film, or even if it's just a general commission for like an orchestra or for solo organ piece, which I composed last year, like a festival flourish that I composed last year, I would always, in most cases, start at the piano. So you probably see on my Instagram, I improvise a lot. It can be anything from 10 to 20 minutes to 30 minutes, just straight improvisation. And this is something it's letting ideas flow, really. It's not kind of be bound to a key or a certain rhythm or harmony. I just kind of play. And it's not kind of conscious decision. It's kind of unconscious. I kind of keep playing and think, oh, that's quite nice. And then what I do is, so say I'm composing for a film, I would notate down on manuscript paper some of the ideas and themes. Yes, on manuscript paper. Yeah. So I write down on my ideas down. So say, oh, I love this melody in D major. I was like, oh, I need to write this down. So I write it down quickly. And so I write it. I always basically carry some manuscript paper with me anywhere I go. And so I write it down. And then in the context of, you know, writing a piece for solo organ, I would also, you know, the one I did last year, I also started the piano, but I predominantly worked on A3 sheet music, A3 paper. So I didn't really use a DAW as such. It was all kind of in my head, which I notated down based on what I played on piano. So my workflows are different. But I always start at the piano, depending on the project, because I very much feel that that's where kind of my ideas are conceived, and I can then orchestrate, you know, those ideas either in Sibelius or in Logic Pro, or in Pro Tools even, and you know, I can write those down and then, you know, develop them more on manuscript paper. After that. So that's kind of just a whistle stop of my creative process. And I think letting ideas flow, not being bound to a key, you know, right. I think the most important thing is to write stuff down early, because when I was younger, I would keep improvising and then I would go away. I would think, what was that lovely bit I played? I was like, damn it, I can't remember it now, and I didn't write it down, and it may have worked for a really good cue or a very good composition, but I think, you know, if I was to urge kind of young composers and just general advice, is to kind of, when you have the idea, it's like a butterfly. It's hard to catch it when it comes, and write it down, because that could lead onto something different, and it could lead to a whole composition, a whole suite of ideas. So yeah, that's kind of my creative process.
That's crazy. I mean, to me, it's crazy that you still write it down. I think that's excellent.
Oh, I'm very traditionalist. It's actually quite interesting, because I work in a hybrid way. So I work both in a traditional sense, like writing stuff down on manuscript paper, and I like that. I like the kind of, not aesthetic, but I like penning things down. But I also work with technology as well. And when I work on film scores, I use a hybrid approach. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. No, so I kind of, I always start at the organ, which I suppose is like starting at the piano, but I do fix myself into a key. So I think, what key do I want to this to be written in? Because quite a few of the things I've done have there's like an obvious key, either it's for a specific thing, or choral music, so there's some sort of I always try and fix the key right at the start. And then I'm not necessarily looking for ideas as such. I go with shapes. So I don't know,
That's fascinating.
I wouldn't score out any notes or everything, but then I'll, like, if I find a shape, a physical shape, or a shape with my hand, and I think, oh, I like that shape. How does that connect to the next one?
That's so cool. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so I draw it out just as shapes and pattern, because I really like pattern and I really like color, and tone is really important. And then texture. I'm a texture girl. I know some people are like, not so much, but I really like playing with texture. So kind of, it's more about the actual shape of it as opposed to notating it. That's kind of something that, so I then end up with, I have two very different processes then. My experimental composition, which, like you said, it starts in improvisation, really. But again, it's always working with shapes or sound qualities. So I really like metallic sounds and things. So it's how am I going to use that, which combination of and how am I going to put that into textures. And then I have a kind of, I might have done a recording, part of which is used for the experimental, music, which is not designed to be notated ever. It's just for listening purposes. And then I will maybe take a few of those shapes. Okay, how can I turn this into an organ sonata?
That's so fascinating.
So wow. All of the compositions are kind of grouped because some of them are fundamentally the same idea. They might even be in some of the same keys, but it's two very different approaches to the treatment of it. I've never written anything down, not since like my grade 5 horror exam.
Well, I tell you, it took me 3 times to take grade 5 and pass it. Put it that way. Oh dear.
Yeah, so I'll use Sibelius.
Yep.
Again, with the shapes, and I'll just put those down as Sibelius. And it's re-listening for me, so I'm less concerned about the first time I do the improvisation. I just do it and then kind of forget about it, and then I put it on background just as I'm doing things, and it's in listening to it that I kind of go, all right, well, that's maybe not the bit that stick out to me. Why is it? Is it the texture? Is it the tone? Is it registration? Okay, what do I want to use for what? Which direction is it going? So then I have 2 very different streams of treatment of from one source. So yeah, then I'll obviously use Logic and things.
I'm just very interested with the idea of shapes, Rebekah, because it's the first time I've heard. I think I've heard Eric Whitaker talk about this at some point, his kind of composition process. So when you take, like, for example, a shape like a circle, what kind of thing is it? Kind of like a circle, and you could use a kind of musical notes. Is that how you attach it, or?
So there's no notes. So essentially, it could be transposed into any key. Like making a dot to dot. But so actual pictures involved. It's just a blank piece of paper, and it'll just be almost like, I suppose some people, they might say, "Oh, this is a graphic score," and in some way, but it's not to be replayed. So it's not a graphic score. It's just my process. It's because it does become notation. So I think the purpose behind it is not to be confused, which is why I'm confident when I use that word. Yeah. Because that in itself is not the composition. Yeah. But I notate it in that way, or with colour, and I quite like the sort of a bit of colour theory and the colour wheel, and I very much have that in mind when I'm improvising. So it's not necessarily about a repetition. And I think some of that comes into someone sent me an email recently saying, oh, this is such minimal work, and I'm kind of like, well, it is, but it has inflections of that. But I don't take issue with it, but I think it's not to just go, oh, your Anne Lister sonata is minimalist. I'm kind of going, I don't know about you, but for the minimalist music that I listen to, it's not really, there's parts of it in there that kind of go towards in that direction, perhaps, but I wouldn't necessarily just go, oh, everything you do is, people are so quick to kind of box it in, and I think I'm not labeling it as that, because it doesn't really fit the criteria for some of the things.
I'm just fascinated how you work with shapes and kind of like do your structure and texture. I've never worked like that. It's it's something I'd love to try out at some point. So it's a really fab idea, and it's so that's kind of how you generally work. That's how you can start kind of every single kind of work of yours. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
I start in the same way, and I just constantly I have a little Zoom recorder, and I just have that in my bag, and because obviously it's always on the organ. So I generally get, a nice stereo kind of. The disadvantage is that because I don't notate it out, it's really honed my transcription skills, because I have to listen back and then find it and use my MIDI keyboard and things. And sometimes rhythmically that's challenging. But there's no way, well, there is, but I just can't be bothered, is the truth. Like, there's nothing inspiring to me about playing a MIDI keyboard with an organ sound on it, or playing it out for composition. I think, I want experience, because it's very spatial as well. So it's the conditions under which I like to compose. My whole sort of thesis was really about space and sanctuary and ritual. And I think, lots of those themes feed into the process. And actually part is repetition. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same results. Because I never do get the same results, but it's about creating the same conditions each time. So it's almost habitual, as opposed to, I'm sitting down at this time and I'm going to. I know some people do like that. We have a friend who's a painter, and he's like scheduled 9 o'clock, start painting, 11:15, I have my break, go back to, what I mean? And he's really scheduled like every day, and that's how he works. And I'm just like, that's really interesting. But I think it's, you compose 20 to 30 minute improvisations. The same thing. Because I think you need that long to get into it. Anything longer, you kind of go into something else. It's just getting those threads and going, is this working? Is it not? And I think there's probably more that I get rid of than I keep.
I've got to admit, I do compose quite modally. That's a thing. I mean, when I think of a person who I am very much inspired by, obviously Thomas Newman is a big film composer which I aspire to, obviously Hans Zimmer and Howard Shore. But the way I use harmony when I improvise, you probably have heard it on my videos, but I mean, I do use chromaticism now and then, but it is quite modal. So there's maybe like 1 or 2 modulations in the actual music itself, but yeah, it's good to improvise for that 30 minutes. It's a good time.
Yeah, good. So if we wanted to listen to your music, how do you feel about releasing music? Do you release music yourself? I know this is a question that's come up a lot recently on different forums. I don't know if that's just in the industry that it's come up, or if it's just popped up on my feed quite a lot. This conversation about access and releasing music, and if you do it yourself or if you do it through labels, or what counts as published, I suppose.
Yeah, so I need to get onto this year. I keep saying I want to release music, but I literally have not had the time to actually sit down and mix and master my tracks to make it sound to sound. So is that?
It's so much work. People don't realize
It
work.
is, and I mean, I have so many friends who are like engineers, and I said to them like, I'll get in touch with you. I promised that you, I'll get in touch with you, and I'll send you my tracks to master. And I'm like, oh, and then I've got so much. Anyway, so yes, I am going to release more music this year. Well, I'm going to release an album this year, potentially a few singles. The album which I'm planning to release is the soundtrack to the OST to The Great Conjunction, which is the award-winning film which I scored about a year or two ago now, which has received awards all around the world, which has been absolutely incredible. So I'm releasing the whole soundtrack later this year. Also releasing the soundtrack to Nelson and Giants, which is the film which I'm working on now. So I'm in post-production for that just now. And I'll be releasing my own compositions for my own portfolio as well. I've got a whole list. I've got about a terabyte full of compositions, which are just like, it's basically my sound bank. So one thing actually I do when I compose, if I just at a random point, I feel like I need to hear something with orchestra, I record it into Logic, and I basically I make a sound bank. What I mean by that is like different keys, different emotions, and I put it in folders on my drive, and I can use that for potential cues in the future. So it's very much like kind of archiving and documenting my work. So that's one thing I do. But anyway, going back to streaming, yes, I am going to release some stuff on Spotify and Apple Music later this year, and Amazon Music. And I need to get all my ducks in one row, finish the projects which I'm working on. And when I have time, I'll send the stems and finish mixing the mastering music, and then release it on Spotify and other streaming platforms.
Yeah, I know for me, I tend to record all of my own music.
Mm-hmm.
I like to have control of that, because I think that I generally I'm recording in the places that I'm practicing on the instrument I'm practicing. So I have quite a lot of time in there on my own, and you only sometimes when other people come in, they have a slightly different vision. And for me, there's certain things that I know other people get really like the knickers in a twist about, that I'm just not really interested in. So like what the tracks are called, or which reverb setting is used, or you know what I mean. I'm quite relaxed with stuff like that, because I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But what I really am not relaxed about is the raw recording. Because I think it has to capture the space and the instrument in the way that I'm hearing it. Yes. So you can do whatever you want to it afterwards. If I'm happy with the raw recording, then it will be fine. What you do to it afterwards, you're not going to ruin that, because I've captured it in the way that it's intended. Yes. And I think sometimes people are the least concerned about that. They're like, oh, well, this bit wasn't right, and and they can get kind of stuck in production. Whereas I'm like, send it to the master, and do whatever you want. Yeah.
I think it's also what one thing is quite important is to. I mean, I think I've seen lots of videos about this. I think not to be scared of sharing your stuff, like sharing compositions, because it's actually an interesting point. When I was like composing like 3-4 years ago, when I started to compose professionally, should we say, I was very scared to release my music because I was afraid it would be copyrighted. I'd be afraid it would be used somewhere else. And so I was kind of reluctant to share anything. And I thought, I want to keep it to myself and use it for things I want to. But now more than ever, I feel like I want to share my music more. And as musicians, as you know, Rebekah, it's all about exposure. It's all about, who not sometimes what And, the more you release, the more you're kind of out there, on social media, on different social on streaming platforms, the more people can listen to music and think, oh, Rebekah would be fantastic for this film or this fantastic choral piece. We love her work, and she'd be perfect. Same with me, like, oh, these piano videos are cool, it could really work for a good film. So I think that's a really, really important point there. It's about not being scared to release your music, even if it's not perfect, sharing something with the world, and just letting people hear your music.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, my first album I released, it was very sort of site-specific work with a Lancashire label called Set Up Press, and they do lots of environmental kind of Lancashire based, which is great. And then, and that was really, really good, really positive experience. And then I thought the second album needed a different audience. I wanted to do different things with it. So that came out, that's Posey's Bow, that came out just in December, in time for Christmas. They worked really hard to get that going, get that out. And that was through Yuggoth Records, which are in America. And just the response, I'm like, this is so cool, like they do a lot of dungeon synth type thing, and I'm like, this is a whole other group of listeners that I have found elsewhere, I think. And so I just like, I do prefer to release through a label, because I think the amount of promotional time, there's so much donkey work in marketing a release and pushing it and things, and the same with like the Amethyst Organ Sonata, publishing it and things, and there's just so much donkey work on the other side, and I think I'm not prepared to do all of that, because it's time that I could spend making more music for them to get out. So I prefer to kind of send it off and let somebody else have that hassle, though lots of people are, especially on Bandcamp, Spotify and things are getting sort of streams and things, but so long as it's out there and it looks, it reflects you. I was having this conversation yesterday, and I was saying, actually I was giving a guest lecture to some students on the Organ the Bandlister project, and I was saying, you have to be consistent across the board. So if we're having a chat now, that has to be consistent with our posting on Instagram and Facebook and your bio and your website and your YouTube. Like, it has to be consistent across the board. But then that also translates to you in real life, because there's nothing worse than meeting someone and going, oh, well, I thought they were like this, but they're actually like that. Using your sort of social media accounts, and like you do, hi, I'm Anthony, and this is what I'm doing today.
That beginning always cracks me up. Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's you need to tell people who you are. But no, it's so important to have continuity between, as you say, the different social media platforms. And for me, it's not only kind of my business, but also a way to share, just share some music, and even try to make someone's day happy, or make someone happy, and that's the sole aim for me. Is like, if I could make someone happy through my music, then I'm happy, I'm satisfied. I've shared something special, and someone's liked it and someone's commented, I really appreciate that. But what's really interesting, so my Instagram is obviously the account which I use quite a lot. That's the kind of my account which I hang on, use the most. And it was actually through that account, through Instagram, that I was contacted by Adam Gibson, a friend of mine, and he asked me if I'd like to help with his album at Abbey Road. And so he messaged me, because we met at a networking event in Edinburgh, I think about 2-3 years ago. And we talked about, potential collaboration, collaboration being key thing for me. And he messaged, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to. So I was the copyist for him, and I prepared all the parts for the musicians, and Abbey Road was incredible. And that's one opportunity that came up from my social media, which was incredible. And then subsequently, the thing I'm working now with Louis Taylor, he messaged me also through Instagram and saw my videos and thought, oh, he's doing all these things. He's got these time lapses that he's done, all this workflow stuff he's done. And he messaged me, he's like, do you want to be part of my project? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. So it's about using your social media not just as a business tool, as a place to get commissions, but also work, but also to link up with like-minded people, and like yourself, Rebekah, and that's how we ultimately met. And I think it's making those connections, making those collaborations, meeting someone, albeit online. Now I think with the lockdowns and pandemics, we've had to kind of adapt to online kind of meeting, and some people are kind of reluctant to do that. But I think that's so important. More people are kind of open to meet online, to chat about music, and to share knowledge, to share experiences. And I think it's a great way to link up with people. And so yeah.
Yeah, and it's really good, like you said, because they can see your track record. They can. It's not just sort of necessarily all shiny. It's the real. You can see that you're putting in the time as well, which I think in this day where social media can turn quite toxic for lots of people, actually, by just being yourself, it kind of gets rid of some of that, because it's like, well, I'm not trying to pretend, I'm just being how I am, sort of thing. So I think it's good. So obviously, we've both got projects. We're in January. We've both got projects under wraps. What month would you say people should, pay special attention?
Oh my days, that's a difficult question. I would say towards the summer. I would say May, June, July. Because then most of my projects will be kind of coming to an end then. So I would say spring, summertime. Yeah.
I've got some things coming in March.
Ooh, I'll look out for that.
Very excited. And then July, August at the moment. Yeah, my time. So
that's exciting. All under wraps, though, of course.
All under wraps. It's all announced.
That's so difficult because it's I've got a couple of projects which I can't speak about yet because they haven't happened yet. So it's very difficult to say I'm part of this project and everything. So I kind of first have to do the projects and then say, oh, there's a privilege to be part of the project, and then share what happened, because I generally don't like to post kind of beforehand and kind of preempt what's going to happen. So yeah.
Good. Okay, so watch this space. Right, one cringy question that's like really interviewing. What would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say be true to yourself, love what you do, be inspired by others, and just soak in as much experience as you can. Learn from others, and that's how you grow, I would say. And also, it's difficult to find something you love when you're younger, but try and find, well, for me, I would have tried to find more kind of hobbies and stuff that I would like, and perhaps be more extracurricular, do more projects and more kind of hobbies outside my school life, and reach for the stars, really. Because dream big, because if you dream big, some things may happen. So if you dream big, work hard, love what you do, you have a passion for what you do. If I was younger, then I would say that's a key to success.
Yeah. I think I would probably say, be forgiving of yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't kind of carry unnecessary burdens, because actually, You don't need to. I was having this conversation yesterday with these students, and I was saying to them, deadlines are there. If you want to make the deadline, you'll make the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think often we can feel lots of guilt around doing or not doing certain things. And really, just kind of own up to it. Just own up to it within yourself and say, all right, I dropped the ball there, or, no, I didn't do it. I didn't put the work in, or,
Just be
I didn't.
honest with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think often, it can be, everything's like so outward facing, and sometimes, it becomes, oh, I missed that deadline, and well, that's just, a bit silly and all of this. And really just own it, just be okay with the fact that sometimes it's, everything isn't going to go tickety-boo.
Accepting. Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing. It's like, if things don't go your way, don't stress over it. If things happen, some things you can evade, some things you can't, but just let it happen and see what happens next.
Yeah, and I think there was one week where I'd applied for different grants or projects, and I got 7 or 8 rejections in 5 days. And so I'd say to those people that are maybe, thinking, oh, I'm never going to get the opportunity. Keep going. You will get the opportunity. But, maybe you can be a little bit smarter about it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't just apply for one grant, apply for 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I always operate on the basis that the answer is going to be no.
Yes.
Ever the pessimist. And often it is, but you just kind of have to, it's part and parcel of it. So don't be discouraged by that, because it is totally, totally normal.
Yeah.
Often it's not a reflection of you at all. It's just circumstances completely outside your control. So, don't, be quite accepting of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, rejection is part of the process.
Yes.
It's not a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Very, is it a personal thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah. No,
I agree. It's important to be resilient as well, to counter these challenges and rejections. And I think, I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, there are challenges there, but they're there to test us, to develop, to get better. Because without, so. For example, I'm not good at exams. I don't like sitting in the hall, writing exams, and I just dislike that. And I'm more kind of creative. I like creating stuff rather than doing, work and exams. But, there's a few times where I felt like I failed my exams, and I, in total honesty, I felt that I didn't do well as I could have. I stressed too much and everything, but that for me was a failure. I felt that I could have done better. And it was through that failure that I grew, that I realized that, maybe things do happen for a reason, So I think it's important to be resilient, not to take things to heart, because that can overstress and everything. So important to be resilient and never give up, never give up. That's the important thing, keep plowing forward. Even they say no 10 times, 50 times, 100 times, keep plowing on, keep doing lots of hard work, keep following your passion. If you follow your dreams and work hard, there'll be some person or something that will land you something special.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, you're an example of it. Look at you. Great. Sorry, I did a little rendition of Reach for the Stars.
Out of character.
It was a serious moment, and then I kind of was like, oh,
okay. but seriously, Reach for the Stars, and that's what we do, because it's the Stardust.
You could put that as insert a little bit of audio.
Yes, absolutely. Or like a motivational quote: "Reach for the stars," and then put some audio on top of it or something.
Right. Well, it was so lovely to meet you. Hopefully, you've picked up some tips, or maybe just been reminded of, some things that we all or many of us probably know already, but it's never does any harm to be reminded. And give Anthony a follow. Give me a follow as the Girly Organist if you don't already. The links will be in our description boxes. And thank you to Anthony for your time today. And I think we should do a catch up in like 12 months, and we could talk about the project.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebekah. I really appreciate the time, and to everyone who's listening, I hope this was insightful and hopefully, inspires you to be the best and to compose more music, and happy music making.
Yeah, more music. Just need more music, don't we?